Here to talk more about these unusual talks and what's ahead for U.S. and North Korea is Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. He's a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and he's been encouraging the administration to continue its pressure on the rogue state to denuclearize. Welcome, Senator. The devil is in the details when it comes to denuclearization, verifying that actually this is happening. Do you expect anything substantive to come out of the Trump-Kim meeting?
I sure hope so, but I think the only way that's going to happen is if we maintain the maximum pressure campaign that has brought Kim Jong-un to the table, hopefully in good faith. But we absolutely need denuclearization. It has to be dismantlement, verifiable, irreversible. It's a pretty tall order, but that's really what this administration must demand before we relax any of the pressure.
Mr. Pompeo's meeting with Kim Jong-un, I have to say, came to us as a surprise to me. He's now taking the lead in high-level negotiations. Does this put him in a better position and increases the chances of his confirmation as Secretary of State?
Well, I hope there's no problem confirming Mr. Pompeo. He's an extraordinary individual. He's well suited to the task. His experience now with the CIA, I think, really serves him well, as we're seeing right now in terms of his diplomacy with North Korea.
Senator, you are on the Foreign Relations Committee, and we have any number of questions now arising about what the proper role of Congress is in working through foreign relations with the presidency. We have the issue of the agenda being set for the summit with Kim Jong-un. We also have the question of those missile strikes against Syria. What do you think the proper role should be? For example, should the president, should the administration have come to you in advance or soon afterwards, at least, on the Syrian missile strikes?
Well, they did. And we just had a briefing with Secretary Mattis and General Dunford yesterday, together with DNI Coates. So they are consulting with us. And, you know, presidents have by and large complied with the War Powers Act, although they've never really acknowledged that it constrains them from their Article 2 constitutional powers. So I think Congress's role is oversight, it's appropriation. If we are really talking about a significant military involvement, I think declaration of war, authorization for use of military force, which we'll be bringing up in Senate Foreign Relations Committee tomorrow to discuss how we can actually craft a AUMF that really is going to address the very difficult issue of Islamist terror around the world.
Going beyond the missile strikes from last Friday night into Saturday, now we have reports, maybe conflicting reports, about further sanctions against Russia tied to those chemical attacks, with, of course, the ambassador at the United Nations, Nikki Haley, maybe getting over her skis a little bit and getting dialed back. Do you have a view? Does Congress, does the Senate have a view on whether there should be further sanctions at this point against Russia?
I wish Russia were no more than a friendly rival, but unfortunately they're an unfriendly adversary. We do need cooperation from Russia. You know, one of my questions in the briefing yesterday is, what is Russia's relationship with Iran in Syria? Russia wants stability. Iran is not providing stability. So we would like to be able to work with Russia, stop their aggression. That's going to take strength and resolve with all of our allies in NATO and in Europe, pushing back against Russia's aggression. I think sanctions can sometimes be a double-edged sword, can be used against the West in terms of Putin's popularity. So we need to target them. We need to target them toward the oligarchs. There's some sanctions that work really well, some that can be somewhat counterproductive. And again, it's the president that has the authority under the Article 2 of the Constitution to conduct foreign policy. And, you know, sometimes it's a pretty messy world and you need to be somewhat flexible. So I'm a little concerned about Congress micromanaging the administration when it comes to some of these very delicate relationships that we must engage in around the world.
Senator, let me now turn to trade, because you've welcomed the president's willingness to re-engage in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but we have seen the president backpedal a little bit on that. Overnight, we had a tweet talking about it. Why do you believe that a multilateral approach would be better than what the president wants, which are more bilateral free trade agreements, say, with the likes of Japan?
Well, first of all, I believe in free, fair, and reciprocal trade. I think it helps all nations that engage freely, fairly, with reciprocal treatment. I think you have to prioritize what's the real problem area in terms of reciprocal treatment. It is China. President Trump is absolutely correct in that. What is the best way of making sure that China adheres to the rules of the governing bodies, from my standpoint, is with a unified front of the other trading countries in the world. You know, TPP, for example, without the U.S. is about 13.5% of the world economy. With the U.S., it's about 40%. That is a very powerful bloc demanding that China actually adheres to the rules of the WTO and other world trading rules. So we have to identify the main cause of the problem. We have to have an effective way of doing it. Engaging in trade wars with the trading partners that we're going to need to rely on to make sure that China adheres to the rules, I just don't think is an effective negotiating strategy.
But the U.S. has already left the TPP. There's a reason the countries wanted to become the initial members of the TPP. They've already had an agreement. So what are the chances that you're going to get a better deal out of these members who've already said that they are happy with what they agreed on?
Certainly, my discussions with a lot of those individuals and representatives of those countries, they would welcome the U.S. coming back in. We still are the world's largest market. We're the world's largest customer. And so people want to do business in the United States. So we do actually have a great deal of leverage in negotiating free and fair and reciprocal trading agreements. I just encourage the administration to get in there and negotiate it. You know, let's make sure we conclude NAFTA negotiations. Let's re-engage in TPP, and then let's really identify the main source of trading woes, and that really is China. But also recognize that China is in a different place today than it was 10 years ago. They are beginning to innovate. IP protection is becoming important to the Chinese economy. So rather than look at all these negotiations as somebody wins and somebody loses, and let's face it, China has been winning and the rest of us have been losing. Let's try and negotiate agreements where we win-win, because that's really what trade's all about, is a win-win situation.
So before we get to the leverage of negotiating the trade deal, what kind of leverage does the United States Senate have with the administration to perhaps change President Trump's mind right away? I mean, he was against it, then he was for it, now he seems to be against it again. You've made clear your view. Are they listening to you?
I believe they have. Remember, we've exempted an awful lot of countries from the steel tariffs, for example. So, no, I think this administration definitely is listening. I think that's the reason why President Trump said, well, let's take another look at TPP. So I think the best thing we can do is just make persuasive arguments from the standpoint of the states and the districts that we represent, but also just from the standpoint of why free, fair, and reciprocal trade is really in the best interest of not only America, but the rest of our trading partners.
Senator, thank you so much for your time today. Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin.